Margaret Hayes had always believed in the goodness of people. At 72 years old, with silver hair styled elegantly and pearls resting against her floral dress, she carried herself with the grace of a woman who had weathered life's storms with dignity. Her modest home was filled with photographs of better days and broken bar days when her son Daniel still called regularly, before his marriage to Christine had created an unexpected distance between them. It was a Tuesday morning when the delivery arrived. Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she opened the beautifully wrapped box. Inside lay rows of handmade chocolates, each one a tiny work of art. Dark chocolate truffles dusted with cocoa powder. Milk chocolate hearts filled with raspberry cream. White chocolate pieces decorated with delicate swirls. The card read simply, "Happy birthday, Mom. With love, Daniel." Margaret pressed the card to her chest. Her son remembered. Despite the months of silence, despite the tension, he remembered. She carefully placed the box on her kitchen counter, deciding to save them for later, wanting to savor not just the chocolates but the feeling of being remembered. That evening, her phone rang. "Hi, Mom." Daniel's voice carried that familiar warmth she'd missed so much. "Daniel, sweetheart, thank you for the chocolates. They're absolutely beautiful." There was a pause. Then, carefully, he asked, "So Broken Bar, how were they? Did you enjoy them?" Something in his tone made Margaret hesitate. It was too casual, too studied. After raising a child for 27 years, a mother knows when something isn't quite right. "Oh," she said slowly, her mind working quickly now. "I gave them to Christine and the kids when they stopped by earlier. They love sweets so much, you know." The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret's heart began to race. She'd lied instinctively, protectively. Christine and the grandchildren hadn't visited in 3 months. But that pawsy broken bar, that terrible, telling pause on the other end of the line. "You a broken bar, you did what?" Daniel's voice had changed completely. The warmth was gone, replaced by something cold, something frightened. "I gave them to your wife and children," Margaret repeated, her voice steady despite the dread creeping through her veins. "Is there a problem, dear?" "Mom." "Yeah, broken bar." His voice cracked. "I need to go." The line went dead. Margaret stood in her kitchen, the phone still pressed to her ear, staring at the beautiful box of chocolates on her counter. Her hands were shaking now, but not from age, from understanding, from the horrible, dawning realization of what those chocolates might have been meant to do. She didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table, that box of chocolates before her, thinking about the son she'd raised, the boy who caught fireflies in mason jars and cried when their dog died, the teenager who defended smaller kids from bullies, the young man who'd promised to always take care of her. What had happened to that boy? 3 days passed, no call, no visit. Margaret finally reached out to her neighbor, Patricia, who worked at the hospital. "Could you check something for me?" she asked quietly. "I need to know if anyone was admitted with possible poisoning." Patricia called back within an hour. "Margaret, there's nothing in the system. No one's been brought in." Because no one had eaten them. Because Margaret had lied. It took another week before Daniel appeared at her door. He looked terrible. Thinner, dark circles under his eyes. His hands shook as he stood on her porch. "Mom." "Yeah, broken bar." He couldn't finish. Margaret stepped aside, letting him enter. She'd rehearsed this moment in her mind 100 times. She'd imagined anger, tears, confrontation. But standing before her broken son, she felt only a deep, profound sadness. "Sit down, Daniel." They sat across from each other at the same kitchen table where she'd taught him to tie his shoes, where they'd done homework together, where they'd planned his wedding just 4 years ago. "It was Christine's idea, wasn't it?" Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. Daniel's face crumpled. "She broken bar." She said you had money saved, that you were old and wouldn't need it much longer anyway, that we were drowning in debt. The house, the cars, the lifestyle she demanded. Broken bar. He buried his face in his hands. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." Margaret reached across the table, placing her aged hand over her son's. "And you went along with it. You sent your mother poisoned chocolates." "I couldn't go through with it," he said, tears streaming down his face. "That's why I called. I needed to know you hadn't a broken bar. I was going to confess everything, but then you said you'd given them away." and I panicked. I thought I'd killed my own wife and children. But you were willing to kill me." The words hung in the air between them. "I don't know who I've become," Daniel whispered. "I look in the mirror and I don't recognize myself." Christine wanted more and more, and I kept trying to give it to her. And somewhere along the way, I lost everything that mattered. I lost myself, and I almost lost you forever. Margaret sat quietly for a long moment, studying her son's face. She saw the boy he'd been and the man he'd become, and somewhere in between, the moment when love had twisted into something dark. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "I've left her," Daniel said. "I packed a bag 3 days ago. I've been staying at a motel, trying to figure out how to face you, how to confess what I almost did." He looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes. "I'm turning myself in, Mom. I'm going to the police." "What we plan at a broken bar." "What I almost did a broken bar. I deserve to go to prison." Margaret felt tears on her own cheeks now. "And Christine?" "She keeps calling, demanding I come back. She doesn't know yet that you're alive, that you never ate them. She thinks I'm losing my nerve about covering it up." His voice broke. "She's a monster, Mom, and I almost became one too." They sat together in the fading afternoon light, mother and son, separated by an unforgivable betrayal yet still connected by 27 years of love. "I want you to get help, Daniel," Margaret said finally. "Real help, a therapist who can help you understand how you lost your way. And yes, you need to face the consequences of what you planned, but I want you to know something." She squeezed his hand tighter. "I forgive you." Daniel's sob was raw and painful. "How can you possibly a broken bar because you're my son?" "Because somewhere along the way, you lost sight of who you were, but that person is still in there." "Because you called me, trying to stop it." "Because you're sitting here now, ready to face what you've done." She paused, her voice thick with emotion. "And because holding on to hatred and anger for whatever time I have left would poison me worse than any chocolate ever could." 3 months later, Margaret sat in a courtroom as Daniel pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder. Christine was arrested when police found her emails and text messages detailing the plan. She showed no remorse, even spitting curses at Daniel for his betrayal. Daniel received 5 years, with possibility of parole in 3. Christine received 15. Margaret visited him every week. They talked through glass at first, then across tables in a visitation room. Slowly, painfully, they began to rebuild what had been broken. Daniel attended every therapy session available. He wrote letters of reflection and remorse. He worked in the prison library, helping other inmates learn to read. And Margaret, she took the box of chocolates, unopened, and donated them to the police as evidence. But she kept the card. "That's simple with love," Daniel written in her son's handwriting. Because even in the darkest moment, even wrapped around such terrible intent, those words had once meant something true. On her 75th birthday, Margaret received a letter from prison. Inside was a drawing Daniel had made in art therapy. It showed a small boy and his mother, standing in a garden, releasing butterflies into the sky. The note read, "Thank you for not giving up on the person I can still become. I love you, Mom, for real this time." Margaret hung the drawing in her kitchen, right where she could see it every morning. Some wounds never fully heal, she knew. Some betrayals leave permanent scars. But she also knew that love, real love, isn't about never falling. It's about choosing to help someone stand back up, even when they've fallen very, very far. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is not revenge, but redemption. Sometimes, it's believing that people can change, even when they've given you every reason not to believe. Sometimes, it's keeping your heart open, even when someone has tried to stop it from beating. That's what grandmothers do. That's what love does, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Margaret Hayes was 75 years old, with silver hair and pearls in a heart that refused to turn to stone. And in a world that often chose bitterness, she chose something harder. She chose hope.